Hey everybody, welcome to another virtual edition of CrossWalk service. Thanks for joining us on this week. What a week we've had. Just seems like a continuation of the bad year we had last year. I'm hopeful things will get better, and hopeful things can't get much worse than it did this past week as we witnessed insurrection against our capital for the second time in United States history. It's been almost 200 years, over 200 years. Yeah, since the last time that happened. And it's shocking and disappointing and creates anger and all kinds of other emotions we need a thesaurus to unpack for us. The service we have for you today actually I think will be quite relevant. First, a meditation song that I'll talk about in a moment. And then a teaching that I'm featuring a different voice than my own for the next few weeks, where she talks on the subject of forgiveness. Forgiveness is going to be one of those things that we talk about in relationship to what happened this week. Forgiveness for the insurrectionists, forgiveness toward our president for enabling and instigating and perpetuating and inflaming what happened to lead to those acts. And some people are going to be calling for Christians to forgive and move on. Like that's what it's all about, is just forgive and forget. This particular teaching deals with the more greater complexities of forgiveness. And she's going to go through a series of statements about what we've heard about forgiveness and what it actually is. Forgiveness is no lightweight subject. It's no lightweight act. There's a lot of things that culturally we think it means, but it does not mean that. So I hope you'll stick around for that, because she has a lot to share that I think will be helpful for our nation and for us as people, as we deal with this very human issue of forgiveness. The reason I want the song that I'm going to set up for you to be a meditative song for you is because the context of the song comes from the book of Revelation, at a time in the last decade of the first century when the Roman Empire was just one hot mess. The emperor at that time was named Domitian. And he kind of outshines the rest of the emperors in terms of the horror of his leadership, the size of his ego, what he demanded people do for him, and how little he cared for people other than himself. Domitian was one who wanted to literally be called Lord and God by his subjects. I'm not kidding. This guy is nuts. And the book of Revelation is a lot about him. And I'm a preterist in terms of my view of the book of Revelation, which means that I view most of the things that happen, in fact, all the things that happened in the book of Revelation have already happened, even the very last chapter to a point. I know that's going to mess with some of you, and you can surely come back Wednesday to ask me why I believe that. There are a lot of academics that I've come to conclude this from. It's good English. But anyway, we can talk more about that later. But what you need to know for this song is that you've got a guy who's imprisoned on an island, whose world is, collapsing all around him. He looks and he sees Domitian on the throne, and it just looks like that's never going to change, and it's horrific. His own religious tradition, the Jewish tradition, because of their corrupt leadership, hasn't been a safe space for him or the other Jesus followers, so they're becoming increasingly Gentile or non-Jewish because of the treatment they've received from the Jewish community. Everything is a big fat mess. And throughout the book of Revelation, this letter to the churches, it ultimately ends up being, well, a wide range of things for some accountability, but then also at the very end, hope and an invitation to see things that are bigger, that no matter how big Domitian says he is, how important he says he is, or how big the Roman Empire might be in its grandeur, is nothing compared to the kingdom of God and the strength and majesty of God. So in this song called Is He Worthy, first of all, forgive the masculine language. It just speaks the time that it was written. You're going to hear a word like father and he. The he refers to Jesus in this, so that's okay. That's legit. But they talk about the Father, and Jesus talked about his Father. Not the jerk father that you may have had that caused you so much pain, not the jerk father like I have been at times and caused pain that I have yet to know about, but I'm sure I'll find out as my kids get older and older. I'm not talking about the worst jerky dads that are out there. So if you're triggered by that, I want you to think of Father as origin or Father as creator in this sense, the one who gives all life. That Father, that person, that creator is very good, loving, kind, gracious, would not seek to hurt you in the least. And that's the God, that's the daddy that Jesus referred to, this intimate relationship with God, this greater other. And so that's kind of the framework, just to excuse that a little bit. And I want you to also appreciate, the context with this, because what's being asked in this song, is he worthy? He's talking about Jesus. Is he worthy of blessing, glory, and honor? And in our shifting political world, where parties flip-flop over the centuries in terms of what their core values are, and politicians tend to disappoint in very significant ways, we're left with wondering, who can we follow? I want to tell you, as a pastor, but also as a person, a human being, and as a Jesus follower, that Jesus is the one that I choose to follow. He's the one that gets my primary allegiance as I decide what I'm going to do with my life. The Jesus that I follow is incredibly inclusive, incredibly justice-oriented, is there for the underdog when they see that things aren't going well for them. This Jesus in so many ways is worth following. So my answer to the question, is he worthy of our attention? Is he worthy of glory for what he's done? Is he worthy of honor? The answer for me is yes. And if you haven't listened to the Go Be Jesus series that I did last fall, I hope that you'll give it a shot again. Go listen to it again, because I think you'll say yes too. It's hard. It's hard to not like what you see in Jesus. Unfortunately, Jesus followers, not always so much. But this song grounds us. It reminds us of what is core to us, and our hope is on solid rock. Our hope as Jesus people is not in the Republican Party. It's not in the Democratic Party. It's not in Donald Trump or Mike Pence. It's also not in Joe Biden or Kamala Harris. Our hope is bigger than that, more powerful than that, longer lasting than that. We as Jesus followers commit to following Jesus, who is always marching toward the shalom of God, this deep peace and harmony for all. And when he pursued it with shalom, deep peace, harmony. He was nonviolent in his approach, and yet he stood for the truth and called out falsehood where he saw it. I hope you'll take a deep breath as we recover from last week. And I hope that this song reminds you that there is one who is worthy of allegiance. He's not the only one that the Spirit of God has worked throughout all creation around the world, but as Christians, he's the one that we look to as the embodiment of that one, that human being that opened himself fully to the presence and Spirit of God, the anointing, which is what Messiah and Christ actually mean. And beautiful things happened because of that. And we're still talking about him and still following him. So may you take comfort and peace as you hear this song, Is He Worthy?
Do you feel the world is broken? We do. Do you feel the shadows deepen? We do. But do you know that all the dark won't stop the light from getting through? We do. Do you wish that you could see it all made new? Creation groaning, is a new creation coming? glory of the Lord to be the light within our midst. Is it good that we remind ourselves of this? Is anyone worthy? Is anyone whole? Is anyone able to break the seal and open the scroll? The Lion of Judah, who conquered the grave. He is David's root and the Lamb who died to ransom the slave. Is he worthy? Is he worthy of all blessing and honor and glory? Is he worthy of this? He is. Does the Father truly love us? Does the Spirit move among us? And does Jesus, our Messiah, hold forever those he loves? Does our God intend to dwell again with us? Is anyone worthy? Is anyone whole? Is anyone able to break the seal and open the scroll? The Lion of Judah, who conquered the grave. He is David's root and the Lamb who died to ransom the slave. From every people and tribe, every nation and tongue, he has made us a kingdom and priest to God to reign with the Son. Is he worthy? Is he worthy of all blessing and honor and glory? Is he worthy? Is he worthy? Is he worthy of this? He is he worthy? Is he worthy? He is. He
Hi friends, here we are at session 2 in this time of experiencing the teaching of Barbara Crafton, and we're spending a day together here at Trinity Episcopal Church on Wall Street, in Wall Street, on Trinity Street, wherever, somewhere down here. It's all new to me. I'm from Canada. I live in Vancouver or near Vancouver. And so it's a privilege for me to come here and meet the folks at Trinity and to spend this time. Now, you're probably doing this over 5 evenings or 5 days, whatever. We're actually spending a day together. Both of us, we're noticing the development of community here as we spend time in the sessions, between sessions, and that's true for you too. So I commend to you the practice of community building, which you know, for you will go over several weeks. For us, one day. We've made our orders for lunch. You're looking after your bodily needs in your way. And we're continuing here with the teaching of Barbara. And the theme that we have this time is, you have heard it said. Barbara, over to you.
Thank you. Well, you have heard it said, you know, it comes from the Sermon on the Mount. You've heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, you have heard it said this, but I say to you this. When Jesus takes the accepted wisdom of everybody and changes it. We talked about this a little bit last time, and I want to continue in that vein, because it strikes me that one of the reasons that we have a hard time with forgiveness is that perhaps we have some wrong ideas about what it is. Maybe the reason it's hard for us is that sometimes we're trying to do things in the forgiveness project, that we don't have to do because of something we've thought about forgiveness and maybe heard about it all our lives, and that may not be true, may not be the way to think about it that is most life-giving and edifying and useful for us. So let's go then. What's like the most familiar thing we hear about forgiveness? It's forgive and forget. If you have thought that forgive and forget was true, and that if you can't forget something has happened, then it means you can't begin to forgive it, well, I think forgive and forget is stupid. That's ridiculous. People don't forget important chapters in their lives. Forgiveness does not erase history or the past. Forgiveness doesn't make something not have happened. Forgive and forget. People often think, oh, you know, like it says in the Bible, forgive and forget. Well, you know what? It doesn't say that in the Bible. It doesn't say forgive and forget. They often think, well, God helps those who help themselves, like it says in the Bible. It's not in the Bible either. All that's in the Bible is God helps those who need help. That's what's in there. Forgive and forget isn't in the Bible because it's stupid, and stupid stuff isn't in there. It's the good book. Forgive and forget is not. About the best thing you can say about forgive and forget is that it's alliterative. And that's not that high a compliment. So if you have thought that you needed somehow to come up with a way of erasing something you did or something someone else did before you can even begin to forgive, well, then I think I have good news for you. That's not what it is. That's not a worthwhile project for you. Your history has happened, and it deserves to be honored. If it's not honored, it's liable to be repeated. And that none of that is what we want. Forgive and forget, no. So one of the things we can say that forgiveness is not is forgive and forget. Sometimes it's easier to describe something in terms of what it is not than in terms of what it is. And this kind of negation of mistaken ideas is a way to see if something can emerge. They say, I don't know if it's true, but they say that someone asked Michelangelo how he made those wonderful statues. And he said, well, I just take the block of marble and I chip away what isn't the image, and then there it is. And well, that's what we're going to do with this too. We'll chip away things that it isn't, and then see what we have. And certainly the first chip to go is forgive and forget. We've already alluded to another one. It's not forgetting, but it's also not acquittal. Forgiveness is not entering into the case against the accused yet again, and this time finding him innocent. We think that, well, if I forgive him, he's just going to get away with it. Well, no. We all still have to pay the price for what we do. Forgiveness does not mean acquittal. It does not mean exoneration. If someone's acquitted, he didn't do it. He's innocent. He walks. But That's not what forgiveness is. If someone is acquitted, there's nothing to forgive. He's fine. He didn't do anything. We only forgive people who did stuff. I only need forgiveness if I am guilty. And I often do, because I often am. You only need forgiveness if you are guilty of something. And you often do, and so you often are. And so forgiveness is not acquittal. It is not exoneration. And it's also not pardon. Forgiveness and pardon are not exactly the same. You know, every Thanksgiving the president pardons a turkey in America, and that turkey does not go on to become somebody's dinner. He goes, where'd they go, those turkeys? There's probably some turkey island where they go to live out the remainder of their days. But anyway, that what they don't become is the guests of honor at your Thanksgiving dinner. They are pardoned, and it means they don't pay the consequence of being a turkey in November. And that's what pardon is. You don't have consequences if you've been pardoned. When a governor or a president pardons somebody at the end of a year, that person is guilty, but he just gets out of jail. He's not acquitted. He did do it, but he no longer has to pay his penalty. Forgiveness is not pardon like that. You may well still have to pay for what you did. We all do. So it is not forgetting. It's not acquittal. It's not pardon. Another thing that forgiveness is not, and this is maybe harder for us to swallow, so it might take a little more time. We think that forgiveness is a matter of degree. We think that there are unforgivable things. And that what makes something unforgivable is how bad it is. Say we're talking about Timothy McVeigh, our homegrown terrorist who killed 169 people, was it? 167? It was a lot. Mm-hmm. Who showed no remorse. He was not sorry for what he did. He did this because he thought that it would make us rise up against our government and he would become a hero. And I remember when it happened, and I was seeing on a television screen the shell of the Murrah building. And I remember a taxi driver saying, well, they should just execute him. They shouldn't even have a trial. So, we don't actually do it that way. But there were many people who said right away, well, hanging's too good for him. No, he cannot be forgiven. What he did was too terrible. So what about that? Timothy McVeigh cannot be forgiven because he killed 169 people, some of whom were children. So then what? If he killed, say, 150? No. How about if he killed 125? How about if we cut 25 off of that and he only killed 100? Yes? No. 80? How about if he killed only 50? The more I talk, the sillier it sounds. Mm-hmm. Because forgiving Timothy cannot be a function of the gravity of his crime. The horror we feel about it is a function of that. We feel a sense of horror about something. We feel a sense of horror about what Osama bin Laden did. We feel a sense of horror about what Hitler did. But the feeling of horror that we have is a feeling. Forgiveness is something else. And we have confused our feeling of horror with the capacity or lack of capacity to be forgiven. Even one death is too much. Mm-hmm. It cannot be a matter of how many, because then you could plea bargain it down. And you could say, okay, well, if he only killed 10, hey, they were going to die anyway. Well, that's just not good enough for us. And we say something like that, it just sounds so silly, we can't go in that direction. Forgiveness is not a matter of degree, and this is difficult for us because of the horror we feel about large and heinous crimes. Heinous crimes fill us with horror, with visceral rage. Sometimes someone does something and we have a sort of a primitive feeling about, I'd like to push the button on that lethal injection. I do that myself. I want to watch, we'll say. We can acknowledge primitive feelings of horror in ourselves and anger and rage about something terrible that has happened. We can acknowledge all those things. But we can't say that those things constitute justice or constitute forgiveness, or that the power of God is not greater than those things. In particular, if in forgiving somebody we are not exonerating him, we're not letting him go, he doesn't just get away with it, we're not forgetting what he did. Likewise, forgiveness cannot be a matter of degree. That hurts us. It might take a while to wrap your mind around that one, and it could take longer to wrap your heart around it. If there aren't unforgivable sins, if there aren't unforgivable people, if God can welcome people we would not welcome, bearing in mind that when God welcomes them, he's not saying that they didn't do anything, or that what they did was good, or that it didn't matter much, or that it was okay. Okay has nothing to do with anything when we're talking about forgiveness. So it's not forgetting, and it's not acquittal, and it's not exonerating, and it's not pardoning, and it's not a matter of degree, and we've touched on this. Forgiveness is not a feeling. This is hard too, because how can I forgive? I still feel so angry. Well, let's think about that. Say you go to a church supper, right? And you're new in town. So I'm going to go to the church, meet some people, get to know people. I'll go to the church supper. I'll make up my casserole and I'll go. And you go and you make up your casserole and you put it on the table. Everybody seems real friendly. It's time to get a seat. So you load up your plate and you find a seat. There's a seat next to a lady. So you sit down, you introduce yourself. She introduces herself. You start talking and enjoying the meal. And pretty soon you hear that that her husband has left her for the curate, and with 3 children, and that the rest of the meal is about that. And you think, well, this wasn't really what you hoped for, but okay, well, the woman has obviously had a terrible shock, so let me just be kind and sit and listen. And only, as the conversation goes on, you learn that it was 15 years ago that this happened, that it's not fresh, it's not a new thing. It feels new to her still. The feeling has continued in her, but it has been so profound in her, this feeling, that she has not been able to let it stay in the past. It has become the most important thing about her. So the 15 years later, she meets a stranger, and the first thing out of her mouth is what somebody did to her 15 years ago. So he injured her back then by doing that. Now, meanwhile, how's he doing? The husband who married the curate. Well, they've left the church now, and they're off. She's a bishop now, the curate, by the way. And they have a whole new family. He never thinks of her. Who's paying the bill on this? Him? No, she is. He was the perpetrator, but she, the victim, is carrying his burden of. Is carrying the burden of it. So her focus on her feeling of hurt and rage, and her inability to think that forgiveness could take root in the face of hurt and rage, has prevented her from moving into her own future, and it has taken 15 years from her. So if forgiveness is a feeling, and if somehow I have to say, well, in order to forgive, I have to somehow develop warm, fuzzy feelings about someone who did something horrible to me, Or about my own shame, I have to develop somehow warm, fuzzy feelings of being welcome and loved and stuff before I can be forgiven. Feelings can't lead us to that state. You know, there's a trinity of the people, of the human being, right? We are reason, and we are feelings. We'd be monstrous if we were not. Remember Mr. Spock in the first Star Trek? He was half human and half Vulcan, and he was always embarrassed by the presence of emotion in himself. He hated that. And the meanest thing Mr. Spock could say to you was most illogical, because he liked logic. Well, he didn't want his feelings, but he was human. And so he had feelings. We are our rational minds, and we are our feelings, and we are our wills, and there is this three-part us. But we are not any one of those things exclusively. They're all three present in us, or we are not human. We become monstrous if any of them is missing. And Mr. Spock looks sort of monstrous to us on the television with his pointy ears. He looks vaguely diabolical, and he's not human to us fully. We are human, and so we are all three of these things. And of these things, the reason and the feelings and the will, no one of them can lead all the time. They have functions. So if you're going to buy real estate, you're not going to be governed by your feelings totally. You better not be, or you might make a mistake. If you're going to get married, your feelings will be very important, but you better have the rational mind operating there too, or you could be making a big mistake. If you're going to enlist in the Army, they're going to ask you to do all kinds of things that you don't want to do, and your will is going to help you do them. So we have to balance these three aspects of ourselves, the trinity of us. And I would submit that in the project of forgiveness, the feelings aren't going to lead you there, because you're too mad, and you're too hurt. They won't lead you there, but they can follow. What's going to lead you to forgiveness is your will. It's going to say, well, I don't like where I am. I don't like the fact that for 15 years I've been thinking about that guy who never thinks of me, and I have not lived my life because I basically signed it over to him. And I had a hurt once, and for 15 years I've been keeping that hurt going. That's not a good deal for me. So I can't make myself not hurt, but I can make myself take a step forward. I can say, all right, I don't forgive him. Truth to tell, I don't even want to forgive him. But if I can say, I want to, I wish I wanted to, I want to be different. Well, then we've taken the first step. We haven't taken the last step. We're not done. Forgiveness is a process, not a moment. We think it's like, boom, a light bulb. No, it's a process. It's step by step. It can be slow. Very rarely is it sudden. Could be, but very rarely. Mostly it dawns on us. And that's what this is like. I don't forgive him. I don't want to, because I have this tumor. But I want to be different. I want to. And if you can say, I want to, you have made that first step. In our rite of confession, reconciliation of a penitent, it's called, page 447 in the prayer book, or 449. If you use 449, there is a couple questions that the confessor asks you when you make your confessions, and one of them is, do you then forgive those who have sinned against you? And when I hear someone's confession and ask that question, sometimes the person will say, oh, meaning, I still have these feelings. But we can honestly say, if you can say, I want to, you can answer yes to that question. Yes, I have begun the process of forgiving. I haven't finished. And it might take my whole life to finish it. But I have begun here. And so I can answer yes. Because in the rite of confession, we are asking God to enter our forgiveness process, our self-forgiveness process. And we can depend on God's help for that. So, I don't forgive him. I don't even want to, but if I want to, then my will has begun to lead me into a direction that my feelings could never lead me. If I just sat in the direction of my feelings and sat with them and just said, well, how are you feeling today? Still mad at him? Yep, okay, we're done. How about tomorrow? Still mad? Yeah. Well, then we could go the rest of our life like that. But if I can take a step, a baby step, a small step, God will bless that step and will increase it. So, forgiveness is not forgetting. It is not acquittal. It is not exoneration. It is not pardon. It is not a matter of degree. Hard one. It is not a feeling, but rather an act of the will. It is a theological decision to live, and here's another one, forgiveness is not about the past. We think it's about the past. I'm forgiving something that happened in the past, or something I did in the past. Okay, the need for it is occasioned by something that happened in the past, but forgiveness is not about the past. The past is done. Forgiveness is about the present and the future. Who do I want my future to belong to? The guy who hurt me in 1968? Or me and God? I want my life to be mine. I want to live it with God. I don't want to give it to anybody else because my life is not that long. None of us are getting out of here alive, and we don't know when it is. And so I want my present to be mine, and I want my future to be mine. I don't want it to belong to somebody else. It does belong to me and to God. And so forgiveness isn't about the past. It's about what's going to happen from here on out. How do I want to live? Who do I want to be? That's a bunch of them, and we'll do more. But I'm wondering.
Wow. Yeah, lots of places to connect, and especially your own stories. I imagine that Barbara has opened your memory into your own stories and experiences. So where would you begin? Who would like to step in?
I think something that Tony said is very relevant for me in terms of somebody forgiving maybe when you're not quite ready. And what I found sometimes has been helpful for me is what you do after you forgive, because immediately after you forgive someone, not everything changes.
Right.
That person can continue to be...
He may not accept your forgiveness. Yeah.
Yes, and they may continue to be a difficult person to deal with. And there always seems to be a lot more work to be done even after you forgive in that relationship. That, I mean, there's a quote, I don't remember where I saw it, which speaks about that if somebody makes you suffer, it's because they themselves are suffering. And, you know, it's not always easy to figure out what they're suffering from or how to deal with it. But that engagement is also a process, like you said, that rebuilding the relationship. And the point of forgiveness seems to only be the very beginning.
Yeah, it's not the end of the event. It's kind of the beginning. It makes it possible now to have a relationship, but it doesn't make it easy. It's not the end of the sentence. It's among the first words of the sentence.
I actually agree with both Tapua and Mother Crafton in terms of forgiveness, the work to be done after. I actually see it in the sense where it's an ongoing process, where forgiveness is, like I said, a lifelong process. It's not the moment, the aha moment, and that's the end of it.
No.
I see it almost as I take the first step by choosing to forgive the person, and the present as a gift where I can decide how I can move on into my future with what mindset, with what attitude towards life, towards the offender, towards myself.
And with help. When we say, you know, remember that Bible story? It's a man and Jesus says, well, you have to believe. And the guy says, well, I believe. Help thou my unbelief. Well, it's like that. I forgive. Help thou my lack of forgiveness. Supply in me what I don't have myself. I'm not strong enough to do this on my own. I can't just, you know, turn on a switch and now I've forgiven. So walk with me and help me do this. And since this is God's desire, God does walk with us and does help us do this. And we have a power greater than ourselves that can help us do it.
You know, it's interesting. It's really interesting. If you've ever been on Facebook, you've probably seen this. It said something to the effect of being angry at somebody is like letting them live rent-free in your head. And, you know, I think about that a lot when I get angry. You know, and for me, that is motivation, if you will, to forgive somebody. You know, it's to carry that around, like my dad used to carry that Samsonite. I'm pretty sure it's still in a garage somewhere. Just, you know, carry it around like luggage. You know, but the other thing is, I think that sometimes you, I think you said this before, you get really comfortable with that
Yeah.
anger or that feeling that you have. Like
Becomes
the woman,
a part of you.
Yeah, like the woman, you know, 15 years, she's hanging on to, you get comfortable. And I think that sometimes you hold on to something so long that you can't remember what it feels like to live without it.
Yeah.
You know,
Or maybe you don't even think you can live without it. Or that you are yourself without it.
There's practice. There's practice. You know, like I said, how do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, practice, practice. I feel like how do you get to forgiveness is practice, practice, practice. And I'm always practicing, whether I haven't gotten there yet, but there's that, you know, trying not to carry it, recognizing all these things that I'm carrying, even talking to myself, having arguments all over again, and then having to shut myself up and say, what are you doing? What are you doing? Once, and I was mentioning this to Barbara before, I try it and it does work. I just have to keep doing it, is holding the person that I want to forgive, just holding their name and just saying their name when I'm doing the prayers, and that's it. And the funny thing is I remember you saying, not saying, I forgive such and such, even though they've been a jerk, and they've like, you know, and that's practicing not going beyond saying the name. So it's something that's so real when we're being unforgiving, that there's something very real, I think, that I know I have to do to work through it, because there's still those feelings that you talk about attached to the forgiveness, whether it's betrayal or like the person is still around, if they're still around. Actually, it's probably better if they're still around, because at least but you know, they're still around and still doing some of the same things. And so you feel a sense
sometimes
of
the thing is not in the past.
Right.
It's ongoing. And that makes it hard.
Yeah.
But isn't that why you said it before? My motto is, I can forgive you, but I'm not going to forget what you did.
Right.
Because you leave yourself open for that same thing.
You might do it again, and I don't have a duty to be re-injured in the name of forgiveness. That's not part of it.
Yeah, it's not part of the deal.
And Mother Crofton, you did mention before that forgiveness is not acquittal.
No.
So for that perpetrator, they're not necessarily free from their own bondage, their own self-created bondage. But at the same time, you set yourself free from allowing their behavior to negatively influence
One of
your
the
life.
things that we dream, want to be true, we think that forgiveness will mean the restoration of presence, that we can be together again. You know, he can come back home and have dinner with us every night like he used to. Or maybe like he never did, but like I always wished he did. And that's the dream, that forgiveness would bring about community. But it may not. He may not be able to come home. There are in situations of domestic violence, for instance, it's often the case that the violent one can't come home because he is not his own master, and he can't, he genuinely sorry, but he can't not do it again. And she does not have the duty to expose herself or her children to harm. And so it may be that forgiveness can only happen sometimes if presence is not restored, only if she is safe. There are people in the middle of the night that go to a house that only the police know where it is, so they can be safe. And he may never be able to be a part of the family as he was again. And maybe she can only forgive if she is safe, knows herself to be safe. She can then begin to forgive and to understand and say, I know why he does this. He was beaten himself by his father when he was young, every Saturday night when he was drunk. Then to begin to understand and from a position of safety and not from a position of needing to repeatedly invite the hurt. Because we don't have a responsibility to do that. It does not honor us, and it does not honor the perpetrator to constantly stroke his weakness and allow it to flame. So that's hurt. That's painful, because we all would wish it would be magical. And if I forgive you, it would mean now that we could begin a life such as we wanted. Maybe not. But a life, nonetheless, in which you both live in the world and you both are here. And both are safe. You safe from injury, the perpetrator safe from being depraved.
Folks, that's probably a good place for us just to come to a close in this session. I just noticed in myself all the things that I would love to pursue, but I'm just anticipating that in the remaining 3 sessions there'll be other opportunities. So thank you, Barbara, for this time. And so once again, folks, there you are in community as we are, working on these really challenging, deeply human issues. And so we commend to you the work that we are beginning here, commend to your study process, to the life of your community. Blessings be with you as you continue the conversation.
I hope you got a lot out of the forgiveness teaching today, and look forward to the next 3. She's going to unpack a lot of really good stuff. I know I did. I'm treating this like you are as a student, and letting her do her thing and letting the Spirit lead me and take me deeper into my own forgiveness issues. So I hope you're doing the same thing. Collectively, as a nation, we're going to be dealing with forgiveness issues directly related to last week. Insurrection doesn't happen too often, and yet the very definition of that word happened before our eyes this week. It was unsuccessful, and that's good. Sometimes we wonder, how are we going to recover? There's another word that sounds a lot like insurrection that actually is our hope, and that word is resurrection. It's funny how just a few letters changes the word entirely. Resurrection is hope, that we can go from a very dead experience to new life, new possibility. And I think that's what Jesus invites us to. I think it's what God is all about. I think that's part of what shalom is a rebirth, a reimagining, a newness, all of that. And so I invite you to listen to that voice, the Spirit of God that I believe calls all of us, inviting you to new life, new perspective, new ways of thinking, which will involve forgiveness in its fullness. One way that we say yes to that invitation is to model our thinking and our prayer after Jesus. He gave us the Lord's Prayer, which serves as a model, a framework for how to think about entering into this relationship with God that moves us forward. Would you pray it with me now? Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.